What is up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over specifically where I disagree with Dave Ramsey. And it's so funny to me whenever I meet new people, they find out what I do, they find out I'm a financial coach, they think I'm like this spawn of Dave Ramsey, and I just kind of slip it in like, actually, I think he's wrong on several things. And before you freak out, let me put a full disclosure here that Dave Ramsey is also right about a lot of things. He has influenced and changed possibly millions of lives. I personally grew up listening to his philosophy, and I'm super thankful for his strong stance against debt. I also 100% respect the business that he has built and the legacy that he has created. Our country, and honestly, possibly our world, is a better place because of Dave Ramsey and what he teaches. All right, so let's drop the niceties and get into the juicy stuff. My first disagreement is the beginner emergency fund, or the $1,000 emergency fund that he really just blankets for everyone. And I'm not just gonna sit here with my opinions and say, I think it should be higher or I think it should be different. Let's take a look at just the math of it. Ramsey Solutions was founded in 1992 when the baby steps were created. And you probably know where I'm going with this at this point, but in 1992, Dave was also teaching that $1,000 would be the beginner emergency fund. The problem is $1,000 in 2020 is not the same as $1,000 in 1992. So I did a quick calculation using just a plug and play inflation calculator. $1,000 in 1992 is equal to just over $1,800 in 2020. You could definitely argue that I'm splitting hairs at this point, right? $1,000, $1,800, who really cares? But my point here is this: it is 100% undeniable that $1,000 in 1992 is not $1,000 in 2020, and yet Dave will not budge on this. He will not update the baby steps. And I have a huge issue with someone who says we're doing things this way just because it's the way we've always done things. The words coming out of Dave's mouth are not timeless. It's not the gospel. It doesn't stand the test of time. And so these things do need to be updated, and he hasn't done that. The $1,000 emergency fund also doesn't take into account the different cost of living throughout the country. Everyone knows Dave is in the Midwest. He's in Tennessee, but the cost of living in New York, in California, in Florida, Texas, all of these are going to be vastly different. It also doesn't take into account different income levels and expenses. And I think a more accurate statement, if we have to make a blanket statement for everyone, is just to use a very small, maybe 3 to 4% of that person's income as the beginner emergency fund, or 1 month's expenses. In my financial coaching program, I have all of my clients go through my risk evaluation worksheet so that they are made aware what areas, what components of their life have higher risk. Based on those conclusions, we have a conversation and we talk about what a good, smart starting emergency fund would be based on where they are at and what their goals are. My second big issue is Dave's philosophy on investing. Dave has what's called endorsed local providers. So these are professionals in finance spaces like insurance and investing. These professionals pay Dave a monthly fee in order to be listed on his website. And in return, Dave and his team of influencers drive traffic to these professionals. I have no issue with this. It's a great resource. I've used the resource personally before and it's been fantastic. My issue is Dave doesn't talk about expense ratios and the fees that come along with mutual funds because he recommends mutual funds and actively managed investments. Expense ratios are lethal for your portfolio, and I go into all the details in this video here, so make sure you check that out if you don't know what an expense ratio is. In that video, I talk about how a negligible 1% expense ratio can actually eat up hundreds of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of a portfolio. And Dave doesn't talk about this. He doesn't talk about it nearly as much as he recommends actively managed portfolios. I have an issue with that. I don't earn commission. I don't charge a fee when I recommend my clients to professionals. And so it's much easier for me to to recommend and to speak without any sort of bias. It's kind of a sticky situation when these ELPs are paying him a monthly fee for him to drive traffic to them, and honestly, it could be a conflict of interest. The third thing that I disagree with Dave on is the credit score. Dave says that a person doesn't need to have a credit score and that the credit score is a flawed measurement. Even though I do agree that the credit score is kind of a dumb way to measure a person's ability to handle money, society doesn't think so. It is 100% possible to have an excellent credit score without having any debt, without paying a dime of interest. And so that's what I choose to do because I don't want to be penalized in all these other areas of my life. If you want to learn more about your credit score, check out this video here because I go in depth on what your credit score is comprised of and also how to get it higher. To me, it's just so much easier to have a good credit score without the debt than to go against the grain and really struggle when it comes to car insurance or renting a car, renting an Airbnb. It's just not a hill I really want to die on because I can have a great credit score without having any debt, without paying a dime in interest. And that's what I teach others as well. My fourth thing really kind of goes along with this, and that is Dave's vendetta against credit card companies. And let me just start off by saying, I get it. These Wolverines have the credit card game figured out, and it financially ruins people every single year. However, I don't fully align with Dave's behavior modification philosophy. If someone was an alcoholic, if they struggled with alcohol, would you just tell them to never go to another wedding, never go to a restaurant, never go tailgating, never go to a sports event? The list goes on, right? Yes, okay, if someone just stayed in their house for the rest of their life, I guess that does solve the alcohol problem, but is that sustainable? Is that realistic? And ultimately, is that what's best? And I want to reiterate, I get where Dave is coming from. If you struggle with credit cards, you've got to be vigilant. You've got to cut them up. You've got to stop using them completely. But after things are more under control, it's good to circle back around and really address the root of the issue so that you can function in society. And I know I say that a little jokingly now, but I mean, there's so many things that require a credit card: renting equipment, renting a car, Airbnbs, condos, hotels, all of these ask for and require a credit card. My husband and I, we don't pay any interest. We pay all of our balances off at the end of the month. To be honest, I'm a little paranoid, so I pay it off like every couple of days, but it helps with cash flow, and we're able to make about $1,000 passively throughout the year utilizing cash back. Another huge pro of utilizing a credit card is the customer support and protection. Several months ago, I had some fraudulent charges come through on my card, and all I had to do was submit documentation that they were fraudulent. And the credit card company itself actually went and fought the transactions for me, and I didn't lose any money on that. No checking account is going to do that. That protection really only comes from credit card companies. All this to say, behavior modification can get you out of a bad situation, but you have to address the root of the problem at some point, and doing so will make your life a lot easier. And honestly, credit cards is just one example of that. Number 5 is that Dave recommends halting all retirement contributions during baby step number 2, which is when you pay off your debt. And this includes employer match. As a general rule of thumb, throwing away free money is bad. I understand gazelle intensity, but we also have to be gazelle smart. And I get it. I know Dave can't have all of these asterisks under the baby steps, but an employer match is literally doubling your money. It's a guaranteed return on investment. And to not do that, I just think that warrants an asterisk under baby step number 2. Number 6 is Dave's house buying philosophy. For those of you that don't know, Dave recommends buying in cash if possible. Obviously, that's not going to work for everyone. So his second option is to buy a starter home with 20% down on a 15-year loan. Pay that off early, and then you can upgrade to your next kind of level of house and then do that again. I definitely agree that, of course, 20% down is going to be optimal, but here's the truth. PMI can also be negotiated out of a loan with a good credit score. I also agree that a 15-year loan is definitely optimal as well, but with the rest of it, buying a starter home and then upgrading and then upgrading and then upgrading, you have to take into consideration things like the market, things that are completely outside of your control that's going to affect this long-term investment. And I'll just be honest with you, the philosophy and the idea of buying a cheapo starter home, paying it off, saving up, upgrading, moving, it all sounds like a nightmare to me. I do not want to uproot and move my family 5 or 6 times, especially when there are so many other ways to make a living situation profitable or at least sustainable, like house hacking. I would rather be creative and find other solutions than buying a cheap starter home and really struggling to resell it. In addition, keep in mind, moving that many times, it's very likely that you're going to be losing quite a bit of money that way as well. Overall, there's a lot of points that I agree with Dave Ramsey with, but the ones that I've listed have always just been so glaring to me. I'm very curious if you have points that you agree and disagree with Dave Ramsey on as well. I would love to hear your perspective in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you got value out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.